Hey guys, Dustin here. Welcome back to another episode of Horroritis. Today we're talking about Day of the Dead Bloodline. Now, when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I was actually fairly excited. The movie looked really good, at least the trailer did. Now, as I actually sat down and watched the movie that was released, I don't know, a couple weeks ago on video on demand, well, after watching it was kind of a different story. So as usual, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what the plot is, and then I'm going to go into some specifics and give you some spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, you should probably check it out first, unless you don't care about spoilers. So let's jump right in. So this movie is basically just a retelling of George Romero's Day of the Dead. It takes place in a military facility. It's after the world has been overrun. It's basically everything that was Day of the Dead. They don't really add a whole lot of new stuff to it, and I mean, aside from just basic retellings, it's not so bad. So I mean, if you've seen Day of the Dead, the original Day of the Dead, then you know exactly what this movie is and what you're in for. So let's jump into all the other stuff. This movie started out with a bang, just straight out of the gate, just gore and zombies and stuff being messed up, and it was an amazing start to a movie. And then the rest of the movie happened. Now, to be fair, this movie did have its good points, and I'm going to cover those just real quick because there's really only a few. Now, the gore was actually really good. The gore and effects were pretty decent. A lot of them were practical effects. There were some digital, you could tell, but a lot of them were practical, and for the most part, they were all pretty good. This movie has runner zombies. In all the original Romero movies, they were kind of the shambler zombies, but these ones are runners. Also, spoiler alert, there's a bub character, although in this movie his name is Max. And this one is kind of different from, well, okay, he's really different from Bub, but in the good way is that he kind of plans and thinks and is more or less coherent of his surroundings. So that's actually kind of cool, and I wish we would have seen more of that from Bub in the original. So if that's enough to make you sit through an entire movie, then you're good to go. This movie could work for you. But there's a lot of things that they did wrong or things that could have been done better, and I'm going to tell you all the ones that at least pulled me out of the story. So the first thing is a lot of the dialogue is very stiff and stilted. It's kind of like, you know how some things read better when they're written and not when they're spoken? It's kind of like somebody wrote this down, and instead of the actors interpreting the lines or figuring out how to say them naturally, they just read it word for word right off the page, and it sounds very artificial. Another thing with the voices, it sounds like they're actually dubbed. For the first good half hour of the movie, it sounds like they overdubbed everything. Like all the voices are just, added in after the fact on top of the movie, instead of just, using what they said when they said it. It almost sounds like they had to go back and re-record the first 30 minutes of the movie and then try to sync it up. And that, along with the unnatural dialogue, just really, it was hard to watch. After about 30 minutes or so, though, it either clears up or you just get used to it and then you can just kind of go along with it. There's a few situations in this movie where things are just kind of unrealistic. And of course, before you say anything, I know it's a zombie movie and zombies aren't real and the whole thing in general is unrealistic. But that aside, the way that people react to certain threats seem to be unrealistic, and they put themselves in situations where normally people wouldn't or shouldn't or would generally know better. For instance, there's a scene where the zombies actually break into the compound and there's a little girl there, and instead of running from the zombies, she runs straight into the zombies, and not a single zombie. Now, mind you, these are runner zombies. They're fast, and, they tackle and they grab and they jump. Not a single one of them reaches out to snatch up this little girl, and there are way more zombies than there are people. So if somebody was running into a group of zombies, somebody's taking a bite. But of course nobody did, because the girl was very important to the plot. Now, all that aside, I could have watched this movie. I could have enjoyed the movie. I did for a little bit, actually. This movie, I could have overlooked all of those flaws. But the thing that really just killed the entire movie for me, I think the thing that probably will not sit well with a lot of people, is the way they portrayed the Bub character, or in this movie his name is Max. Now, in the original Day of the Dead, Bub was kind of a beloved character. He's the one you remember from that movie. He's the one you rooted for when he pulled that gun on Rains. I mean, it was kind of like a stand up and cheer moment. It was cool. So, just when they took the Bub character and put him in this movie and changed him, it was, well, let me explain. So before Max, his name is Max, before he becomes the zombie, he's actually a creepy stalker. He's madly in love with the main character, whose name is Zoe. She's a medical student, and at one point in time he shows up to let her draw some blood, and when he pulls up the sleeve, he's got her name carved into his arm. And then later on in the movie, he tries to rape her right before he's attacked by a zombie and, you know, inevitably becomes one. Then cut to 5 years later, they go back to the hospital where she was working and they find him. Except instead of putting him down, he's able to hide under their car and drive to the compound with them. He literally holds on to the bottom of their Jeep while they drive back. So he gets inside, then he's able to hide in the weeds, and eventually, you know, he kills a guy and sneaks in, and then basically just spends the rest of his time James Bonding around. You know, he's like a zombie ninja. He's like crawling through air ducts and ducking around corners and dodging things. But at the same time, anytime he sees somebody interacting with Zoe, he gets like super jealous and like super horny and attacks people. And, you know, even as a zombie, after they catch him and they chain him up to the wall to do the test, he's still trying to, you know, like lick Zoe's face and, you know, kill any guy that comes near her. They ruined the one thing that could have made this movie great, even with all the other flaws. They took the one beloved character from the original, and in my view, you know, the original was slow as hell, and Bub was basically the only thing worth watching, except for, you know, when they ripped out Rains' throat. That was pretty sweet. But yeah, they took the one thing that made that movie great, and then they just pummeled it and destroyed it and just made it wrong. So instead of, you know, a smart zombie who potentially people could learn from, and, you know, they could study, and, you know, kind of a character that embodied hope and, you know, possibility for the future, they took that and they turned it into a creepy, horny, jealous stalker ninja zombie that just made no freaking sense. And I think if it hadn't been for that character, this movie, it wouldn't have been a great movie, but it would have been watchable. But just, yeah, they screwed it up pretty good, I think. So that's my review of Day of the Dead Bloodline. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. As always, all my social media stuff is in the description. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to be notified every time I upload. And that's pretty much it. So until next time, I'm Dustin. This was Horroritis. And as always, keep it creepy.